What happens if you start working with someone on a project or a business together and you don't sign a contract? Find out in this week's episode. Hi there. Thanks for joining for another exciting and fun episode of the Conscious Counsel podcast. It's me, your host and lawyer and founder of the law firm Conscious Counsel, Cory Sterling. I'm so happy that you have decided to tune in and join this really crazy podcast episode with an unbelievable story that you're not going to believe that I've recently gone through with one of my clients. And I just can't wait to jump into it and share with you. As always, the purpose of the Conscious Counsel podcast is to help you protect and grow your wellness business with confidence and clarity. That's what it's about. I go through these stories with my clients. I share them with you. I explain a little bit about the law. And the idea is so that next time you're in a situation, you're going to be like, oh, I should sign a contract before I do this. And this week, I'm talking about what happens when you are working with someone or have a new business project that you're working on, and you're just like, oh, cool, I love you, let's do this thing together. And whoops, you forget to sign a contract. And then you start working together, and then you have a fight, and you realize that this person is not the person that you want to be working with, and you try to get out of it, and then it's really difficult, and you have to pay a lawyer a lot of money to navigate the situation. So in this week's episode, I'm going to talk a little bit about the importance of signing agreements before you work with someone on a project, and I'm going to share a story that I went through with a client, and we're going to wrap it up with a bow, and you're going to say, thank you, Cory, that was such awesome information. Okay, cool. So the important legal information that you have to know is when you are working with someone or starting a project or doing any form of joint venture, the law has these invisible rights that it applies to the situation. And the assumption always is that if you're working with someone or you have some form of commercial relationship, so relationship for your business, you're going to sign a contract that's going to outline what the expectations are in working together and who's doing what and who owns what and who's responsible for what and all of those super fun things. And I know what you're thinking. Hey, I'm just doing a 1-day yin yoga nidra class with sound healing. I don't need a contract. Okay, cool. If it's a one-off and it's at a studio and you're both employees of the studio, you're right. You probably don't need a contract for that. But if you have a new business idea or you're trying something new or you're running a retreat or you have a new idea that you're building the branding around and you ask your friend to join you or your friend invites themselves to join you and you start working together and you produce something together, the law has certain laws that it applies to the relationship without you doing anything. And the general rule is that if two people are working together, they're both going to have ownership over the intellectual property of what's created. Now, in this context, intellectual property can mean the customer list, it can mean the right to the design or the logo or the business name or the idea for what it is that you're creating. And I know that it seems so harmless, right? Hey, let's work on this cool, fun project. I think it'll be really great. And you go for it, and then it doesn't work out, and you want to move on, or you want to keep it, or it was your idea that you brought to someone, and now they claim that it's theirs, and you don't have the paperwork to navigate the situation. So the thing that you have to understand legally is that usually if two people start working together on something, subject to a signed agreement, so wink, wink, nod, nod, I always want you to have a signed agreement communicating expectations openly and honestly in the relationships that you have. If you just start a new project with someone, the law is going to say, okay, well, you both sort of contributed and it's going to be too sticky to untie who came up with what idea. So you're both going to own it 50-50. And when you try to untangle it and you don't have a signed agreement, we enter a situation I call the Wild Wild West. And the Wild Wild West is one of my least favorite situations to be in when I'm working with a client or trying to get a result for my client. And that is because in the Wild Wild West, it's a super complex legal situation. Neither party has a strong legal position. And as a result, the only way you're getting out of it is by some form of agreement between the two of you. And so that means negotiations, it means mediations, It means a lot of hurt feelings. It means sleepless nights. And you don't want to be in the wild, wild west, because in the wild, wild west, you just have to make a deal with this person or people. And usually when you're trying to make a deal with them in the wild, wild west, you already are stressed out. You already don't want to work with them. You don't want to talk with them. You don't want to communicate them. And you pay your lawyer a bunch of money so that you don't have to. And you're just like counting the moments until it's over. And that is why before you're entering into any relationship or building anything with anyone who you're, working with or potentially working with, what I want to make sure is that you have a written agreement to support whatever the terms of the relationship are. And now I get to tell you the story of my client. So, really cool client, 2 dudes in the state of Florida who have an idea for retreats that they want to run. My client, person A, is the one who basically did all of the branding, did all of the marketing, did all of the advertising. And there was one component of the Pilates retreat where they needed a facilitator for the retreat. So they brought on this other person. And they're like, hey, why don't we do this together? This will be so fun. And in the most basic sense, my client did everything, put up all the money up front, collected all of the money, was involved with all of the logistics. Person 2 was there, but not really there, and was helping, and they ran the Pilates classes at the retreat, which took place internationally. But they called each other partners, and, because people want to do the equitable and the nice thing. And so oh yeah, we're partners in this. Okay, great. Then it just so happened that my client was like, oh, wait, I'm doing everything here and I'm taking all the risk and we're splitting things 50-50. And this is not a fair situation. And you're not pulling your end. And I want to take this in a different direction. And the person 2, who was the facilitator of the services, was like, no, what are you talking about? We're partners and I don't like this new direction and I want to do things this way. And it's also my business. And that's when I get the email. So I get the email, I hop on the call with my client, and what is the first question that I ask? If you've been listening to the podcast, you're going to know the answer to this. I always ask the same question whenever I start working with a new client. And I say, send me a copy of the written agreement. Send me a copy of the written agreement. Let me know what you guys agreed upon, and I can totally help you, and we can have this resolved in no time. It's going to be 20 minutes. Perfect. And this person was also a Conscious Counsel Plus member, part of our membership. So I was like, I got this. This is done by today. And that's when I got the response that we never signed an agreement before we started working together. And my heart went that's the noise of my heart twisting in half, because I know that we're going into the wild, wild west. And essentially what ensued following this was not fun. It was not pretty. My client, such a sweet person, was traveling and had this vacation planned and was just like, I'm devastated. I'm gutted. I don't want to deal with this. I'm so upset about it. And it's just all of these things are so preventable, which is why I record this podcast, because I want you to know the actual stories that people go through. And so essentially what I had to do was negotiate with the other party, send emails, try to come to some form of resolution. We ended up giving up a little bit, but in the big picture, it wasn't too much. And just a couple $1,000s later, and probably 2 weeks of agony, and we were able to come to an agreement and find a way for the 2 parties to split ways and divide the legal assets and the rights and who owns what and who's allowed to do what. But this is so easily preventable. And I just said to my client, look, I totally understand. This is your first business venture. It's all good, but please, in the future, you have to sign an agreement. So in a best case scenario, how this story could look differently is client wants to run a retreat or wants to start running particular types of events. Awesome. Hire a lawyer. Hey, I'm going to bring on this person to help me. I need an independent contractor agreement, or I need a facilitator agreement, or whatever it is. And that agreement will outline all of the relevant legal provisions that will dictate who owns what in the relationship. And in this case, because my client was the one who created everything and started everything, it would have provisions to say all intellectual property is owned by person A. We have exclusivity of use of the brand right. We own all of the materials. You're not allowed to use any of this. The list that we develop through whatever campaigns we're doing online belongs to the company, and we're basically just hiring you to be a facilitator or to provide the service. And I'm really, really happy that I was able to teach this lesson to my client, and now my client understands it. But it was just, it was so, to me, I understand that my perspective is unique because this is what I do every day when I open my email. I just put out legal fires and I know the best practices. And I just want everyone to know that, like, even if you just have an idea or a really cool name, or you're starting something and you bring someone else on to work with you, have a written agreement. I don't care what the terms of the agreement are. The terms can be, hey, we both split everything, or we can both use the name, or neither of us can use the name, or the client list gets shared between us, or person A is going to buy the client list for $200. I don't care. I don't care about any of that stuff. What I do care about is that you do have a written agreement. And this was just an example for me where it was like, I saw my client go through hell and be very upset and hurt and disappointed. And it's just like we are all heart-leading entrepreneurs. And as heart-leading entrepreneurs, we make the world a healthier and a better place. And I want to support all of the people who are making the world a healthier and a better place. And when I see people get ready to quit or decide to not keep moving forward or to let their dreams fall to the wayside because they don't do something as simple as have a written agreement, it makes me really sad and I decide to share it. So that is the magic. And that's the story of this week's episode. Look, in the end, it's not a terribly awful, heartbreaking end to the story. It just cost more money than it had to at the start. And it just involved about 2 to 2.5 weeks of being sad, frustrated, and upset. And I get it. And I don't want anyone to go through that. So I really want to support you. So just bringing this in for a landing and reminding everyone, when you're working with someone on a new project, make sure you sign an agreement about who's doing what and who owns what, because laws are invisible. You don't see them. You don't know when you start working with someone what rules the law implies to the relationship. So you always want to have things written down between you. And once you do that, you're in great shape and you're allowed to have whatever terms you want as part of the written agreement between the parties, which is awesome. Just make sure that it's evidenced in writing. That's something that's really, really important. And then the story I shared was my client who had a really cool project, brought someone on to work with them. They called each other partners, even though they really weren't partners. And they never signed an agreement. And when my client realized that they were doing everything and the other person wasn't holding their weight, they weren't able to just cut them, where if they had a signed agreement, they would be able to. So that's really, really important. And I hope that the information lands with all of you. Feel free to reach out to me on Instagram at Conscious Counsel. Say what's up. I love hearing from, I get some awesome messages from people who listen to the show. So just say, hey, Cory, what's up? I love the episode. If you have a question, you can also just reach out to us on Instagram. We'll be super happy to connect with you. And just remember, we want to communicate expectations openly and honestly in our commercial relationships. And also remember one last super important thing. Whatever you do, make sure you are working with a lawyer who loves you. Peace.